bunch of big old football players. You know, I'm not big anyway, but the Lord have mercy, they're 300 pounds, and they fill up that table. And there I'm sitting, I'm a slow eater, and I'm taking my time, got nowhere to go anyway. And I'm eating, and they start getting up all about one time, go to their classes, and they look at me and they say, "Freshman, don't you leave here until you drink all that milk." I look over there, and on the table, there's 2 gallons of milk there. And they say, "If you don't drink that all, we come back in tomorrow morning, and they're going to take that much away from us. So we have to drink all the milk that they put on the table." And that was another thing I didn't particularly like about it.
What did you do?
What did I do?
Yeah.
I snuck out.
I just wanted to know how that ended.
Yeah.
You didn't drink 2 gallons of milk, I hope.
Yeah.
He also asks, what is your best Aggie story?
I can't tell my best Aggie story. We're playing at A&M, and it's a type. You need to understand A&M's facility. It wasn't much different from ours, maybe, but they had rails behind the benches. You'd just be on the floor on the bench, and there's rails behind them. Well, if we sit on the bench, Texas players there, we sit on the bench, there's always towels around, you know, trainers have their towels here and there, and the Aggies would get the towels and pop us on the back of the head with those towels, and, you know, you get enough of that, and sometimes you say something you shouldn't say, but we're playing, and I'm driving in for a layup, put 4 out, and a player named Benford just decks me, just flipped me over, and I got upset at him and said something I shouldn't have said, and then they throw me out of the game, and on the way out, I'm going around the A&M bleachers, and there's all, and by the way, only people in the gym we got 16 complimentary tickets to put parents maybe or whomever right behind our bench, or supposedly. They never got there, but that was what it's for. And so I'm on my way out, and here's A&M cadets with girlfriends, and I got after them pretty good, and they shoo me on. I get put in the dressing room, and after the game's over, and this wasn't unusual either, or you didn't have air conditioning thing, so they had a window fan. It was huge, covered the whole window, and I'm in there showering to get ready, and the Aggies are breaking in through that window fan trying to get to me. And we got ready to get on the bus. I finally get dressed. We got ready to get on the bus, and it's 25 yards from the steps to the bus, and I'm not gonna make it. They're everywhere. And so happens I had 2 friends, both of them baseball players that played baseball at A&M, that saved me. And they still threw rocks and hit our bus as we were driving off. So I've got a history with A&M.
A little bit. Who was the best player or favorite coach that you played against at UT?
Well, John Wooden was from UCLA's favorite coach. We got our butts beat out there twice when they were undefeated, and he had 2 great teams. And we got to stay at the same motel with them, and I had breakfast with him both those times and a few other times. But he was my favorite coach. But we played against a lot of good players. Walton from UCLA, Sidney Wicks, Rowe, Cowens. Nobody knows a whole lot about Cowens. Cowens was from Florida State, 6'9", 6'10", was the center for Boston Celtics for many years, and they won several championships. He was the meanest, toughest we ever played against. With Walt Frazier, a great guard that played it for the Knicks. We played against him. Pete Maravich, you probably heard of Pete. Pete was the he was the most skilled player, could do more with the basketball before his time than anybody we played against. We played him twice, and his dad coached him, and Chris was a good coach, not a great coach, but Pete Maravich was special. I mean, when I say special, I mean really, really special player, and much, much earlier than anybody else even attempted to do, he was doing it, and doing extremely well.
I just wanted to ask, when you're on the court with somebody like Pete Maravich, are you kind of in awe, or do you immediately recognize that this guy is on a whole different level when you're
Back when I was.
yeah.
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 Oh, yeah.
If you could just answer to her, yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't any doubt. You don't see them like that. You have to be able to recognize the difference between what we normally saw and what we saw when Pete played. Now, a little later, we began to see, as we recruited the black athletes, well, a lot of the black athletes were picking up on what the pros were doing, and they began to be able to do a lot of similar things, but not with the same effect that Pete had. Because, man, Lord, there wasn't anything you could do with the basketball that I saw.
Wow.
And you mentioned Bill. You mentioned Bill Walton, but you mentioned John Wooden. Do you have any stories of in those breakfasts or those lunches? Do you have any stories that come to mind with John Wooden?
Well, not any pleasant ones. They were the nicest man in the world, too. They, who was it? The head coach at USC, Bob Boyd. Bob Boyd coached USC. Great teams, but see, now you got to understand, back in those years, you had to win the conference championship to go to the NCAA. That's the reason our schedule was such, and that's the reason that a lot of people were such. They were trying to win the championship. Bob Boyd coached USC during the time that John Wooden was coaching UCLA, and they were national championship about 8 or 9 years in a row. When he was winning those national championships, Bob Boyd had a great team that literally couldn't get in the tournament because they didn't win the championship. So Bob called him Father John. Just kind of making fun a little bit because they always talked about his